Hi folks, I hope you're all doing all right. I am going to start trying to do a few more of these videos, um, partly because it helps my own sanity and partly because there are a lot of words in this biology topic which, if you've not got someone at home who can read the word to you and tell you how it's pronounced, or you've not got the ability to um, access some of the other videos, you won't be able to hear them said out loud. So I'm going to say them out loud for you. If you're unable to access some videos, I can attach them as an actual video and email them to you rather than putting them on YouTube. But for the moment, this is probably the best way to do it. So the last couple of lessons, you've been looking at genetics. The very first lesson, you were faced with quite a few new words. This part here of this diagram should be familiar to you. You've got a normal, simple, generic animal cell here, and all we've highlighted in this diagram is the nucleus. You might have different definitions for what the nucleus is. Hopefully none of you are still calling it the brain of the cell, because that does not get you any marks. You might still say things like controls the activities of the cell, or controls what goes on in the cell. Sometimes that's a bit of a vague answer, and it's a bit close to it being the brain of the cell, so you might accidentally say, "Ooh, a bit like the brain." So instead, as we move up through Key Stage 3 and onto Key Stage 4 and GCSE, a solid, foolproof answer is that the nucleus contains genetic material, because it always does. Whether it's an animal cell or a plant cell or a bacterial cell or whatever. So the first word that this made me a little bit new to you, you might have heard it said. People often talk about chromosomes in normal conversation, perhaps not using the word exactly correctly. When we've looked at DNA in the past, when we've talked about what's in the nucleus, we say, "Oh yes, and your DNA is all in your nucleus, coiled up into a big sort of tight bundle of wool or something like that." That's partly true. It's not just one big undifferentiated lump. It's actually in these weird sort of X shapes called chromosomes. Human beings have got 23 pairs. This is a pair of chromosomes. That there is one, and that there is another one. So you've got 46 in total, or 23 pairs. We will talk about things like genetic diseases, inherited diseases, diseases that occur when this doesn't work quite properly. You can live with more or fewer chromosomes and chromosome pairs than 23 or 46 or 23, but you tend to have inherited issues as a result of that. But we'll come on to that some other time. So yes, you've got chromosomes. The human collection of chromosomes is sometimes shown like this. This is more of a computer-generated diagram rather than actual pictures. Actual pictures, they're a little bit rubbish because chromosomes are very, very small and they tend to look a bit messy, and they give you no more information really than what this does. Some of your chromosomes are very big, some of your chromosome pairs are very big, some of them are very small. And it's just a case of how much information have they got on them. There's this little box down here which shows these two types of chromosome, X and Y. Depending on how you pair together your X and Y chromosomes, decides whether you're going to have male or female characteristics. I think I talked about in lessons how it can be a little bit more complicated than this in a very, very small proportion of the population. Sometimes you get XXX or XYX, in which case there's all sorts of conditions like hermaphroditism, where you sometimes have characteristics of both male and female sexual organs. Yes, so the Y chromosome, it's a little bit strange to look at, but it does look a little bit like a Y, even though most of these look like X's. I wouldn't get too hooked up on it. XX makes a female, XY makes a male. Don't worry about this word, you only need to know chromosomes. So you've got 23 pairs of chromosomes in your body, and each one is a different size, and they're different sizes because they've got different amounts of information in them. That information comes in the form of genes. That's genes, G-E-N-E, not genes as in denim jeans. You've got millions and millions and millions of genes in your body, and they each code for a different thing that your body needs to do. It might be to grow arms, or have brown hair, or have a hairy big toe. That's a popular one. And they're different sizes. So genes for really simple things, I think being able to roll your tongue is coded by a very, very short string of short string of DNA. It's quite a small gene, and you've either got it or you haven't. You can either roll your tongue or you can't. It's not like hair color, where there's lots of different hair colors, and you might have hair color which is a bit more brown, or a bit more blonde, or a bit more red, or a bit more black, and everything in between. You can't partly roll your tongue. You either can or you can't. You've either got the gene or you haven't. Other genes are very, very big. So in your blood, in your red blood cells, there is a protein called hemoglobin, which you don't need to know about until GCSE, but it's a complex protein which requires a very big gene in order to make it. So there's a lot of information that goes into making that particular protein, so it needs a big gene. Rolling your tongue is a fairly simple thing, so it doesn't require a big gene. Each of these genes is made up of a code. You can think of this code here as a little bit like the code in a computer. So different codes of zeros and ones in a computer make your computer play a game, or play YouTube, or open a spreadsheet, or all the other wonderful things that computers do. This code here, this code of bases, you don't need to know their full names. You don't need to know adenine and guanine and cytosine and thymine, but you do need to know A, T, G, and C. Just need to know the letters. They code for the different things in your body. And all of this, all together, is called DNA. Again, you don't need to know what that stands for. You don't need to be able to spell or reproduce deoxyribonucleic acid in a test, but you need to recognize the acronym, the letters DNA. So the main thing that I would like you to do today, because this particular biology topic it's a lot of new words, it's a little bit like learning a new language. You're going to put something together today which you're going to spend 5 minutes on at the start of every lesson in order to try and really memorize these definitions, so that you don't need to keep looking them up or getting confused between them. Attached to today's Show My Homework assignment is this. Not the whole thing, just this bit that says glossary. I think it's five or 7 pages long. It contains all of the words in the Year 8 spec, so you won't need to look at, I don't know, addiction in this particular topic, but you will need to look for words like allele, which is what we're going to do today. Allele, different forms of a gene. Or chromosome, thread-like structure containing tightly coiled DNA. it contains many genes. So as you come across a new word in a lesson, whether it is in a video that I do, although if I do a video I will try and put this up and show you where the word is and bring your attention to it really explicitly, but if it's another video, look out for the keywords. Again, I'll try and highlight them to you so you're not getting bogged down in words like hemoglobin or nucleotide. Not every single video online is specifically made for Key Stage 3 Year 8 Science, so sometimes there's words that you don't need to know. As a good rule of thumb, if it appears in this list, you need to know it. So when you've got this, or you will have this, when you get a new word, either you could print this out, or you could copy it or write it down somewhere. Write yourself a list of keywords for genetics topic. Write down the word, write down the definition. So you've got this list. And then for 5 minutes at the start of every science lesson that you do, get out this list. Ideally, hand it to someone else in the house. Say, pick one of these words. Either read the definition and you have to try and remember what the key word is for that definition, or read the key word and you've got to remember the definition. And just get that practice in. Get that practice in of really getting a feel for what all these different keywords mean. Unfortunately, it is just a case of practice. There's no quick way to memorize these things. It is just practice makes perfect, which is why I'm saying for 5 minutes at the start of every lesson, just do keyword practice. If you've not got someone around at all times of the day who can read the word to you, if you've got them on little cards, you could jumble up the cards and pick one at random. You could close your eyes and move your finger all over the page, provided you've only written down or highlighted the words that you need. But you need to do something. Decide what's going to work best for you. If you're doing something and you're just not remembering them, try something new. Okay, don't spend ages doing something that is just you going over it again and again, and like every time I read the word allele I forget what it means, because then whatever you're doing isn't working. So try something new. Okay, so we have had a little look at that, and we have had a little look at that. So we've talked about chromosomes, we've talked about genes, we've talked about DNA. Your genes code for different characteristics. So we talked about rolling tongue, having brown hair, having light skin, having dark skin, having blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, whatever. Those are what we call characteristics. And it encompasses everything about you. Everything from how tall you are to how what your sort of base level of fitness is. If you come from a long line of very, very fit people who do lots of exercise, chances are you will be you'll be predisposed. You will be more likely to be finding it easy to get fit. So today, because we've already spent a little while going over this stuff, we're just going to do the first little half of characteristics and this idea of what characteristics do you get. I deliberately talked about this word here, allele, different forms of a gene, because that's what we're looking at today. You can think of allele as being like the different types of a thing. So, for instance, we've all got a gene for eye color. Everyone's got a gene for eye color, but we don't necessarily have the same allele. So if you took a bit of my DNA out and a bit of each one of your DNAs out, we'd be able to look through the chromosomes, look right down, find a gene and go, that's the eye color gene. But we wouldn't all have the same one. We would all have a different allele. You could think of it a little bit like I don't know, breakfast cereal. Hopefully, probably, maybe everyone's got some kind of breakfast cereal in the house, but we're all going to have a different type of breakfast cereal. Some of us will have Frosties, some of us will have Cocoa Pops. You could think of it as what else? Everyone, or almost everyone, has got some kind of smartphone these days, but we don't necessarily all have the same smartphone. Some of us have got an Android, some of us have got Huawei, some of us have got an iPhone, etc., etc. You inherit your genes, all of this lot. You inherit this from your parents. You inherit half of it from the mother and half of it from the father, and it comes together to make everything about you. But you don't have, say, your mother's and your father's nose. If your mother has very dark hair and your father has very light hair, you don't have light and dark hair in stripes. Your DNA picks one of them, and it's not just random. It's not just 50-50. You might notice if you've got a parent with dark hair and a parent with light hair, you might notice that most of your siblings, if you've got lots of siblings, generally have darker hair. This is because different alleles are either dominant or recessive. So here we go. Dominant allele. A dominant allele will always be expressed if it is present. Expressed means it will become a characteristic. The other one is recessive, which you could probably guess is the opposite. Recessive allele will only be expressed if two copies are present. So there's a picture somewhere. Here we go. So when you inherit, so here we've got an example chromosome. We've got the same chromosome 3 times, so it's in 3 different people. You could have, say, a parent with blue eyes and a parent with brown eyes. You could have both parents with brown eyes. I'm not sure why this is the exact same one again, or a parent with brown eyes and a parent with blue eyes. Darker colours, so darker hair, darker skin, darker eyes, tend to be dominant. So if you've got a parent with brown eyes and a parent with blue eyes, you're more likely to have brown eyes. If you have a parent with dark hair or dark skin and a parent with light hair or light skin, you're more likely to have darker hair or darker skin. This is just because generally these darker colours are dominant. So it means that in this case, all of these people will have brown eyes. This person has got a recessive blue gene and a dominant brown gene. Because the dominant gene is the brown one, it will get picked preferentially over the blue one. If you've got 2 dominant genes, 2 dominant brown eyes, then there's nothing else for your body to pick. It will always be brown. Same again here. The only way you can have blue eyes is if you've got 2 recessive blue genes. In the next lesson, we're going to do something called genetic crosses. I think it's worth spending a whole lesson on that rather than doing a little bit on keywords and then doing genetic crosses, because genetic crosses are quite involved, and I'm going to try and get a camera and a whiteboard set up so that you can watch me do a few rather than just looking at pictures on here. So you've got a few more keywords added now: allele, dominant, and recessive. If you want to have a look in the textbook to go over that again, or to obviously rewatch this video anytime you like, it's on page 176 of the textbook. I've attached it as well. I've attached all the pages that you've done so far, so you don't need to go on Caboodle, folks. I repeat, you do not need to go on Caboodle. I will try and attach the pages from the textbook if you ever need them from now on, because lots of people are having lots of trouble with Caboodle. Yes, so allele, dominant, recessive, you've added those words. DNA, chromosome, genes as well. Okay.